Hello and welcome to this week's spiritual journey. So this week I have the fabulous Kirsty Elliott with me. Kirsty is a women's empowerment coach. So welcome to you, Kirsty.
Thank you very much. How's it going?
Very well, thank you. So Kirsty, when I was having a look on your website, there's a lot of tools that you use in your work. So I was just wondering, where did you start on your spiritual journey?
That's such a big question, isn't it? Because actually, I think we start a lot earlier than we think throughout life, but consciously kind of making a decision to go on the journey, I think, was when I found emotional freedom technique. So that was about 4 or 5 years ago.
Okay.
When I really started lifting the lid. So I've been doing mindfulness and CBT and starting to read a lot longer than that, about 7 years ago. But that was quite surface, just about managing and coping. And then I realised that with different tools we can go way deeper, and that's when everything started to expand. But I'm realising now, going back to childhood stuff, that I did have quite few spiritual experiences, but I didn't understand them, and they just freaked me out, and I kind of squished it all in a box. So maybe when I was about 4, but
Wow.
about 4 years ago.
Okay, so you talk a little bit about sort of like going back to childhood stuff, and part of the work you do is about inner child healing. Yeah. Now I remember hearing this phrase a couple of years ago, and like with everything, I'm like, what on earth is that? Yeah. So can you explain what, like, does everyone have an inner child? What is an inner child?
Yeah, so the easiest way that I can talk about the inner child is to talk about our beliefs and what we believe. Because obviously when you haven't heard that concept before, inner child, it's like, well, I'm a grown adult now. How does a child or an inner child relate to me as an adult now? And the way that it does, and the reason why everybody does have an inner child, is because when we are children, we are like sponges, and we are learning about the world. We're learning about who we are, what we're not, and we create our core beliefs. So a belief, for example, might be I am lovable, or it might be I'm not good enough. And we start running those programs within us, that we start kind of taking that into everything that we do in life. So you can see how it might be really painful if someone decided when they were, for example, 5, because of something that happened, that they weren't good enough. They're then taking that through to the rest of their lives and kind of seeing through those glasses. So inner child just means the part of you that's still holding on to beliefs that you've maybe created when you were little, that maybe are not true and are causing some kind of blockages. There's also positive ones as well, like if we realize we're awesome when we're 6 and we take that through, that's really great. But we hear more about the inner child that's sad, that needs a hug, that needs some love, that needs some reassurance, because they're the bits that we want to heal and change.
Okay, so in terms of sort of like, so why would we need to heal our inner child?
Yeah, so there's like an example that I always use because I think it's really accessible to everyone. Imagine that you're at work and you have to stand up and give a presentation, or you have to stand up and pitch something or speak to the boss or whatever. And we get that, like, oh, tight chest, churning stomach, like we start sweating, we're worrying about it. And you think, I've spoken to these people every day for the last however many years, or I know what I'm talking about. I really kind of want to get up and do this. I don't know why my body is responding in this way. It feels kind of confusing to people, and it's like they don't know how to switch that response off. And a really good example of how the inner child comes into play there, and how healing that inner child can help us in an adult setting, is imagine you were 5 and you had to stand up for the first time in class and speak out of a book, and then you get nervous and you slip over your words and everybody laughs, and all of a sudden it's like, oh my god, I want the ground to swallow me up. And you make a decision in that moment as a 5-year-old: it's not safe for me to speak in front of other people, it's not safe for me to be seen, I have to keep myself to myself, I'm not good at this. That gets buried then in the subconscious, because we don't need to walk around as like 30, 40-year-olds going, remember that day when I was 5 and the teacher and all of that. So we kind of consciously forget about it, but the response stays. That's the safety response. And, you know, it will bring that memory up to you in times where something similar and say, no, not safe, got to run away, got to kind of yell at this person by sending messages to the body. And it holds us back in life. You know, we're not 5 anymore. We are safe. We have got way more confidence and tools, but we maybe haven't told that part of ourselves yet. So using some of the tools like EFT and hypno and all that stuff can help us bring that inner child into the now and say, you've got it, like it's fine. You can stand up and be confident. You know, it's safe now.
Okay. So in terms of, you know, sometimes you hear people saying about nurturing your inner child. So is this inner child work stuff that people can do by themselves, or is it better to sort of seek and find someone that can help you to tap into that?
Yeah, it's tricky because I definitely love to empower people with tools that they can use for themselves, so that going through life, because there's always stuff that will come up, you've got something that you can use. And things especially like EFT can give you a tool that you can use on your own. But what I would say within a child is, like, some of these feelings can be quite big. As a 5-year-old, that is a big deal, you know, and when we can release the feeling, you know, it can feel a bit emotional. So to have someone to help guide you and to hold space can be really useful. Also because our deeper part of us, our subconscious, the part that wants to keep us safe, the part that does give us these triggers when we're in a bit of fight or flight, doesn't want you to go there. It doesn't want you to go to the painful bits. It wants to block it out and distract you and just make you avoid it. So having someone else there to help safely lead you through that and to work through those resistances is really good, because otherwise, if you're just trying to do it alone, you'll come up like often with a lot of resistance and a lot of avoidance and kind of just procrastination and blockages and just not really getting there. Like, I know for me, if I hadn't have worked with another practitioner on a lot of my stuff, I just wouldn't be where I am now, because I just wouldn't have gone to those places. And of course, these techniques are very new to a lot of people. It's not mainstream. So trying to learn a new technique but on your own and then work with your own inner child, it's like, that's a big ask. It's definitely doable. And I do it a lot for myself now that I've got like the tools and the understanding. But I think if you're starting out and it's all a brand new concept, to seek someone out you feel comfortable with is really helpful.
Yeah. So you mentioned as well there EFT. So can you just explain what EFT is and how that helps people as well?
Yeah, so it stands for Emotional Freedom Technique and is also known as tapping, because the technique itself is about tapping on certain points on the face, the head, hands and body. And it might sound a little bit like weird and woo-woo, but actually it's so practical, like, and really something that you can use every day. So people might have heard of acupuncture and reflexology, and that uses the meridian energy system. So the energy system that we have running through our body, and when we have an emotional blockage or we're holding on to, say, some grief or some anger or any kind of belief that keeps us a little bit stuck, the energy isn't flowing around our body nicely and healthily. It's really important that we get that flowing so we can just generally be well physically and emotionally. So the tapping is like a practical tool that we can use to release those stuck emotions, the blockages, to safely let go of stuff that we're holding on to in a way that doesn't just make it feel like it's all coming up to the surface and then we're not having any way of like letting it go. So it's simply tapping around a certain point system, and you just say different phrases that help you to change your mindset.
So prior to you learning these different therapies, did you learn them because you knew that you had blockages or stuff to heal, or was it just an interest that you had in them?
No, I learned it because of my symptoms, and I think this is really interesting because a lot of people are stuck in their symptoms at the moment with little awareness of the cause, because that's the society we live in. We treat symptoms and we don't often go for the root. So I came to it because of my symptoms. My symptoms were severe anxiety, panic attacks. I was drinking a lot because that was my like quickest go-to help. I didn't have that much self-awareness. I used to run around all over the world, just escaping things basically. And it was actually my mum who learned EFT first, and she was like, wow, this is amazing. And she sneaky tricked me to try and help me. And she said, you know what, I've learned this EFT tapping and I really need help. I need a helper. I need someone who'll sit and do it with me so I can practice. And I was like, I don't really want to, but I have to because my mum's asked me to.
Yeah.
I sat down and we started doing it, and it just went whoosh, and all the stuff I've been holding on to started to come out. And it's speaking the truth for the first time as well. You know, the setup statement is, even though I'm feeling this way, I choose to love and accept myself anyway. And even that in itself is powerful, because we are not used to accepting ourselves or loving ourselves or speaking out what we're struggling with. We bottle it all up. So it's powerful within minutes, basically. And I remember just being like, whoa, what's happening, you know?
Yeah.
And then I realized that it was something that I really needed to explore, and it was a huge game changer.
Awesome. I'm so pleased your mum introduced you to it then.
Yeah, me too. At the time I was really angry with her, because that's what resistance does, you know. When you're starting to go into something you've been avoiding, you go, oh, I don't want to do this, and like, I'm just tired now and I'm hungry, and actually I've got way more other things to do. And to have someone sort of be like, no, come on, you can be a bit like, but it's really good. It's helpful.
Yeah. So can I ask you another question? So you've recently been diagnosed with autism, is that correct?
Self-diagnosed, yeah.
Yeah. So and I remember when I spoke to you, you said you were really pleased that that you had this diagnosis. So I was just wondering, in terms of the tools that you've learned so far and the different therapies, have they sort of like helped you with autism, or with accepting maybe the diagnosis, or how do you feel about it?
Yeah, so right.
Lots of big questions.
Good question. So the tools, first of all, helped me when I didn't realize I had autism. So I was dealing with a lot of symptoms that can come from being autistic and not knowing therefore how to really support yourself properly. So the anxiety and the low self-esteem, issue addiction, all kind of fight or flight, all of that stuff is a big part of being on the spectrum, and is compounded when you don't know. So the tools helped me, first of all, when I didn't know. Their tapping helped me with anxiety. The inner child work helped me to accept and love myself, even if I felt different, even if I didn't understand myself. That helped me love myself anyway. So that was the first step. And then what the tools did was help me to actually realize what the hell was going on in the first place. It gave me an insight into that there was something more going on for me. And I knew, kind of because it opened me up spiritually, I knew that there was more going on with me, and there was stuff that was a lot deeper and a lot bigger that I wasn't quite accessing because I'd shut it down because of not feeling safe or accepted when I was younger. So I'd shut all of that down, and these tools helped me to open that up again and expand it. So it never went away, but I was blocking a lot of my magic. And we can only open up again once we feel safe to do that. If we do not feel safe, we will stay where we are, because that's our number one survival mechanism. So to go on all of these kind of journeys using the hypnotic journeying and the EFT and the inner child work just allowed me to remember who I was, and start to let that back in. So I'm still on that process now, bit by bit, integrating and opening up. And it still feels unsafe. Like, of course, it still like triggers me emotionally to like, I'm going to show my real self, and you know, that feels scary. But now I know how important it is to do that, and to not to shrink back down. And so I use the tools every day to keep myself grounded and feeling safe and feeling good, so that, because the world needs more of our differences and our like magic and our truth.
Yeah, definitely.
That answered the question.
Yeah. I don't know if you caught. So I spoke with Mary Rodwell last week, who is a researcher into UFO and contact phenomenon, and she was talking about autism as well. And the way she describes it, she wrote a book called New Humans, and she was saying that, you know, autism wasn't recognized like hundreds of years ago.
Yeah.
And from her point of view, she was saying that children who have been born with autism, it's like they're not meant to conform. It's like society and schools have this idea of, you know, and I remember writing a blog post myself. I was like, oh my God, you know, if I was told now to sit in a classroom for so long, I'd struggle, because you want to get up and you want to move, you know, and you want to sort of like just be sort of like who you are. But yeah, she was saying that that children with autism, it's like they're just like a new type of human being, that, like, do you know what I mean? And that they're challenging us as a society, because they're not conforming to the rules and regulations that have been put in place beforehand that have worked. And it's like they're trying to break out of themselves a bit. Does that make sense?
Completely. And I see it as a similar thing. So when I realized I was on the autistic spectrum, I felt like what it must feel like to come out as being gay or trans, or it felt like an innate part of me that I'd been trying to shut away and mask down, because I didn't feel it would be accepted, and I didn't understand it in myself, because nobody was teaching me about myself, because it wasn't standard. And it was both terrifying and massively relieving and exciting at the same time. And I do believe, and it's called currently ASD, autism spectrum disorder. And the word disorder I find really interesting, because society views the word disorder as being something wrong. And I hate that, because there's absolutely nothing wrong with me, but I am definitely on the autistic spectrum, and I don't see it as a disorder. But the word disorder, if you break it down, is not within the order, and that's what autism is. We are doing what lights up our soul, and we have an ability to keep saying no all the time, and it's not always kind of easy to cope with in a structured, do this, then do that, then do that. I've been battling with myself for years, trying to put myself in environments and just do what everyone else was doing, and my insides were always just screaming like like what it felt like no, this is not, you can't put yourself in this box. And then I would numb myself down with the alcohol and overeating and running away and shutting down with depression. And the only way for me to keep myself happy and safe is to not do that, and not put the mask on, and not try and fit the box and conform. And of course, my parents didn't know that I was on the spectrum. They didn't know how to best deal with me. So my inner child decided she was difficult, selfish, not wanted, rejected, because of innately who I was. I couldn't change my being. So you can see how it causes a massive problem with suicide, addiction, anxiety, people really suffering and putting themselves on the outside of society, because, you know, they've maybe, especially women don't get picked up very often when they're younger as being on the spectrum, because we present so differently to men. This idea we have of what autism looks like is the male representation, and women are so different, and so they're going through life being misdiagnosed with all sorts of different, bipolar, anxiety, all of this other stuff, when really there's this missing piece, and they're coming to it way later in life. By then a lot of the kind of damage is already done, and they've learned how to mask, pretend, and that's exhausting to keep up day in, day out. And there's an awesome hashtag at the minute, is take the mask off, within the spectrum, the autism community. And I just love that, because I'm only just learning how to do that now. And we're so used to doing it, I don't even know what my masks are. I'm really paying attention now. What does my body want to do? How do I want to move? And it's all becoming a little bit acute now, because I've stopped shutting it down. So it's really interesting process, to say the least.
Yeah. No, I think and again, it was in one of my interviews that I did, and I was saying that when I used to go and work for a retailer, It was pre sort of all my spiritual awareness stuff, but I was still very conscious at the time that like I would drive to work and I would get to work, I would take a deep breath, go in.
Yeah.
And it was that, like you said, it was putting this, like literally putting the mask on. I was like, right, I'm Lindsay now, I'm here to work, you know, this is my job role, which sort of defines me and who I am. And this is what I need to do. And then when I left, like, I felt like I could just be me again. So
but it's exhausting, isn't it?
It is exhausting, yeah. Like I did that for sort of like a good 6 years. And then I carried it through, and then I started doing it in my day-to-day life. And like you said, there just comes a point where you're like, I just can't do this anymore. I have to be true to me and be me, like you said. Do you know what I mean? And if that's like dancing down the street or singing or whatever it is for you, it's just allowing yourself to do that, isn't it?
100%. And I think autistic or not, everybody can relate to this idea of feeling that they have to put on some kind of a mask or take the deep breath before they walk in or wear certain clothes or shut parts of themselves down in order to be able to get on with the thing. And I think it's so damaging. Like that's probably my main mission and my main like message that I'm always wanting to get out of, like, just stop it. Just give yourself permission to stop doing it. And I know how terrifying that can be and how hard, and because sometimes we've been doing it so long we don't even know what the other thing looks like, which is the unknown, which is scary for people. If I stop masking and I stop conforming and I stop doing what I feel like everyone else is doing, what the hell is the other route? You know, how am I going to make money? How am I going to support my kids? How am I gonna and it is, you know, it can feel like and then we shut back down, you know, and that's totally okay. Like, we don't have to take that massive leap all at once. There's this definite backwards and forwards that goes on, which is totally okay. Take a little leap forward and then hide again, and then you've proved to yourself, okay, do another one and then hide again. And it's just like, that's how to do it gently and safely. You know, and we know finding community and other people who feel the same and like-mindedness is just like such a massive support network and game changer, because trying to be the only one that in your circle or your hemisphere that you feel is doing something differently can just feel, because we're like pack animals initially, you know, we feel safe in numbers, so to feel like you're the odd one out walking in the opposite direction can literally set off our entire fear response.
Yeah, no, I agree. But yeah, definitely. So finding community, like you said, and finding other like-minded people. I mean, the internet, like, I love it. I think it's a brilliant resource, you know, for finding people who have similar ideas, similar beliefs. So you're never truly like alone.
No.
Do you know what I mean? Like, I can't imagine people having to go through this in a time where there's no internet, you know, or there's no phones, or you can't speak to anyone. You know, I can imagine it must have been like hundreds of years ago if someone went through this, really more challenging, because you would be forced into that solitude without any sort of network, really.
Yeah, and you know how you were saying that the woman you were speaking to at the other interview was saying it's like the new humans. I don't even think that we're new. I just think, like you said, people weren't aware. So I don't think there's maybe more gay people now. I don't think there's maybe more transgender or more autism. I think now people are just able to come out and say, hey, I feel differently. And then they're finding each other, and then the communities are being set up. So yeah, it must have been so isolating and lonely when you couldn't go and find others like you, because it was just, you were either within the community, the normal standard community, or you weren't. Yeah, so we're very lucky now.
Definitely. It's really funny, because I was doing some group tarot card readings last night at a lady's house, and sometimes spirits will come through when I'm using the cards, and there was a chap came through, and he actually said to me to say to this lady, I mean, he passed away like maybe 40 years ago, but he said if he was alive now, he said, I would have been labelled as autistic because of the qualities that I had back then. So he was like, he very much, he preferred to spend time alone. He didn't like show much like emotional physical contact, so he liked being with people and being there, but he wasn't like a hugger, or do you know what I mean? And so yes, it made me like, I was like, oh bless him, because obviously it didn't have a label back then. It was just like you said, you were maybe a bit different.
Yeah, and it's confusing because when I found what I'll call it, the spiritual community, the spiritual tribe or whatever, I found them and I was like, oh, these are my people. But then those people were big huggers, big cuddle puddlers, sometimes, really close. And I'm autistic, so sometimes that really is uncomfortable. Like I have to really feel comfortable, and I've got to really have made the choice to go be close to a person, and then it has to be bit by bit, not like big drone hug around like but I would shut down, and I used to get really confused about who the hell am I. We're all trying to find our identities a little bit or where we belong. And when I found some of the drug and alcohol free festivals and the spiritual stuff and that community, I was like, that was the closest I'd ever got to feeling like I was somewhere where people understood me or I understood them or we clicked. But there was something that still didn't quite mesh for me, and it was really confusing. I was like, why don't I want to hug people? How come sometimes like I get confused about when I really want to connect, but when I really need to be on my own, and I used to have no idea what was going on within me, and now it makes crystal clear sense. But now I have to have really good boundaries so I can still come and be with everybody and like learn and dance and play and hug and laugh, but also like to not feel like I'm doing something wrong when I say no thank you.
Yeah, I don't want to hug now.
I don't feel like being close to anyone. But it's confusing for me to know at the minute what I feel, because I've been so used to masking and so used to shutting that part down, thinking it was wrong, that I'll still often jump into something when my body, I have to really listen to my body now, and I'm so not used to doing that it's like, it's a transition, but it's and it's really uncomfortable, like saying no. And I teach this and I know how important it is and I know how drastically it can change your life, but it's still so hard sometimes to say no thank you without explaining yourself. Or feeling like, because sometimes I don't understand myself or my body or my needs, so just to listen and say no without any explanation is really awesome but really challenging.
Yeah, it's quite liberating though as well, isn't it, when you can learn to just say no thank you without having to explain yourself or apologize. I remember doing a dance workshop where we had to do that. I don't know if you were there, Kirsty, where we had to go around and ask people, we had to stand in front of them and say, would you like to connect right now? And we had to say no thank you. And for myself, I found it quite simple to do because I've done a lot of work around boundaries and setting, but there was a lot of people who sort of like were going, no thank you, I'm really sorry, I'm so sorry. And I was like, you don't have to apologize. But when it's the first time you start doing it, like you said, if you're not used to it, you have this need, don't you, to say no thank you, I'm sorry, or I apologize.
Or give an excuse or tell them a reason or any of those things. And so like in those kinds of workshops, it's even simpler than real life, isn't it? Because somebody has said, in this exercise we're going to practice saying no, in this exercise, so it's almost laid out and it's still uncomfortable. But in the real world, where there's like feelings and emotions and underlying tones and context and all of that, it's like our easiest thing is to just say yes and give the other person what they want, isn't it? Because sometimes we're so afraid of being rejected or saying the wrong thing or upsetting someone else. And I think what we all could use more of is just listening to our own needs first, doing what's right for us, feeling like we don't ever need to explain ourselves or have a reason. It is really liberating, so liberating. But it's funny when you see people doing that for the first time and there's just this sense of like panic, like oh my god, I'm gonna have to say no to someone, and what if they hate me for it? And that definitely brings up a lot of inner child triggers for sure.
I can imagine. Kirsty, I could speak to you all day about all this sort of stuff, but so just in a nutshell, can you just tell us sort of like how you help people now? Like what sort of work do you do now helping others?
Yeah, so I used to do a lot of one-to-one sessions with people, but I'm really taking it one-to-many at the minute just to try and reach more people. So in the new year, I've got lots of women's circles and workshops coming up in West Yorkshire and York, which teach a lot of these tools, EFT, connection, empowerment, all of that stuff. And I'm also building an online course to teach people about guiding themselves through the inner child process, boundaries, raising self-esteem, all of that good stuff, and just bringing it all online. So I'll do one-to-one sessions and group sessions basically, and just put loads of information out there and hope that it sticks with people.
Awesome, fabulous. Right, so what I will do is I will stick all of your I'll stick your website and where people can connect with you in the description, so if people want to come find you, they can find you on Facebook or your website. Yeah,
thank you. Been so awesome to talk to you.
Thank you very much, Kirsty.
Bye.
Bye.